The Galactic Council had gathered on the neutral station Horizon 7 for the most important meeting in the last 100 years. Ambassador Christopher Hayes stood in the main conference hall and looked around at all the different alien species. Some had scales and some had fur. Some floated in the air and some moved on many legs. All of them were here because humanity had requested a seat at the galactic table. Christopher felt the weight of this moment. He was not just a diplomat. He was the voice of all 7 billion humans living across Earth and the human colonies. The Vorthon Empire had demanded this meeting. The Vorthons were a species that nobody wanted to meet in person. They were warrior people who had conquered 17 star systems by force. They believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. Their leaders were chosen through combat. Their society was built on violence and domination. When the Vorthon Empire wanted to meet with you, other species usually made whatever compromise was necessary and then stayed quiet. The doors to the conference hall opened and the Vorthons entered. Their warlord came first. His name was Krexthor, and he was impressive in a way that made most people uncomfortable. He was almost 3 meters tall. His skin was gray and covered in scars from hundreds of fights. His muscles looked like they were carved from stone. He wore no armor because he did not believe he needed it. His 2 guards followed behind him. They were also large and scarred, but not as impressive as their leader. Krexthor walked to the center of the chamber and did not sit down. He stood there and looked at each species with an expression of complete contempt. When his eyes reached Christopher, the warlord smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just spotted prey. The other delegates shifted in their seats uncomfortably. Everyone in the room could feel the tension building. Commander Lisa Park watched from the Earth delegation station. She had been sent to help support Christopher. Her job was to watch for any sign of deception or danger. She was a military strategist and she understood war. She also understood that this meeting was going to be dangerous. The other delegations had warned them that Vorthons did not come to compromise. They came to dominate. Lisa made a mental note of every exit in the chamber and counted the security personnel. Krexthor finally spoke. His voice was deep and made the floor vibrate slightly. He said that the Galactic Council was wasting his time with their endless talking, and their agreements and their paperwork. He said that real power came from strength. Real power came from the ability to make others obey you. He looked at the different species represented in the chamber and called them weak. He said they were afraid of him. He said they should be. Then Krexthor's attention turned completely to Christopher Hayes. The warlord said that he had heard stories about humanity. He said humans were an interesting species. They were clever and they could solve problems. But they were not strong. They had no warriors who could stand against a true fighter. Krexthor said that humanity had no right to sit at the Galactic Council. Humanity had no power. Humanity had nothing to offer the galaxy except weakness. Christopher remained completely calm. He had trained for this moment. He knew that Vorthons respected strength and confidence. If Christopher showed fear, it would be the end of any chance for peace. If Christopher showed weakness, the Vorthons would take whatever they wanted from humanity. Christopher stood up slowly and looked directly at Krexthor. Krexthor's smile grew wider. He reached out and grabbed the table in front of him. His fingers pierced through the solid metal like it was paper. He lifted the entire table with one hand and threw it across the room. The sound was deafening. Several delegates from smaller species moved away from their seats. Guards rushed toward Krexthor but stopped when they realized the warlord had no weapon. The warlord said that he was going to give humanity one chance to prove itself worthy of galactic respect. He said he wanted to challenge any human to a formal combat duel. He said the winner would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. If Krexthor won, humanity would accept the Vorthon Empire as their supreme leader. If the human won, the Vorthon Empire would agree to peaceful negotiations with the Galactic Council. The warlord said that he was so confident in his own strength that he was willing to take this risk. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Nobody had ever heard anything like this before. Formal duels between species leaders were extremely rare. The rules were ancient and formal. A duel to determine the future of an entire species was almost unheard of in modern times. Several delegates began talking urgently among themselves. Some said this was barbaric. Others said this was suicide for humanity. Christopher did not hesitate. He stood up straight and told Krexthor that he accepted the challenge. He said that humanity would compete in this duel. He said that he would be the one to face the Warlord. Christopher said that humanity was not afraid. Humanity was ready to prove its worth to the galaxy. Krexthor laughed. It was a deep, booming laugh that echoed through the entire chamber. The Warlord said that he respected Christopher's courage even if it was foolish. He said that they would meet in the ceremonial arena in 7 days. He said that the entire galaxy would watch this duel. He said that this duel would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Lisa Park immediately stood up. She moved close to Christopher and told him they needed to talk in private. The other human delegates looked shocked. Some appeared angry that Christopher had accepted without consulting them, but Christopher knew what he was doing. He believed that this was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. The Vorthon warlord and his guards left the chamber. As soon as the doors closed, the other species erupted into conversation. Some believed humanity had just committed suicide. Others expressed grudging respect for Christopher's courage. The Galactic Council president called for an immediate recess. The human delegation moved to their private chambers to discuss what had just happened. Lisa Park was furious. She said that Christopher had made a huge mistake. She said that no human could defeat a Vorthon warlord in hand-to-hand combat. She said that Krexthor had probably killed thousands of enemies with his bare hands. She said that the odds were completely impossible. Christopher listened to everything she said. Then he asked her if she believed that humans had any other choice. He said that if they refused the duel, the Vorthons would see it as weakness. He said that every species in the galaxy was watching. He said that this was about humanity's future among the stars. Lisa Park felt the weight of his words. She was a military strategist, and she understood that sometimes you had to take great risks to win. She looked at Christopher and said that she would help him prepare. She said that she would study everything about Vorthon biology and fighting techniques. She said that they had 7 days to find a way to defeat an enemy that seemed unbeatable. Christopher and Lisa shook hands. They both knew that the next 7 days would determine whether humanity would rise to a position of respect in the galaxy, or fall into submission under Vorthon control. News of the duel spread throughout human space like lightning. On Earth, people gathered in public squares to watch the broadcasts. In the human colonies, workers stopped their jobs to discuss what would happen. Millions of humans sent messages of support to Christopher Hayes. Some sent prayers from their religious traditions. Scientists sent calculations of Vorthon's strength. Military leaders offered strategies and advice. The entire human species was now united in watching one man prepare to face a monster. Commander Lisa Park did not sleep for the first 2 days after Christopher accepted the challenge. She locked herself in the research station aboard the diplomatic ship and studied everything about Vorthon biology and fighting techniques. The information she found was both fascinating and terrifying. Vorthons had evolved on a planet with much stronger gravity than Earth. This made their muscles incredibly dense and powerful. Their skeletal structure was designed to support tremendous weight and force. They could lift objects that weighed 50 times more than their own body weight. Their reaction time was faster than most humans. Their durability was legendary. Vorthons could survive injuries that would kill any other species. Lisa found records of Vorthon combat matches that had been recorded and archived in the Galactic database. She watched fight after fight. Every single Vorthon she observed fought the same way. They were incredibly aggressive. They attacked with overwhelming force. They never retreated. They never showed caution or hesitation. They always went forward. Vorthons seemed to view defense as a sign of weakness. They preferred to simply overpower their opponents. Lisa began to see patterns in their fighting style. The patterns were consistent. The patterns were predictable. But they were also effective because raw strength could cover most tactical mistakes. Christopher Hayes spent his time training with combat specialists from different Earth cultures. He worked with a wrestling coach named David who had trained many Olympic wrestlers. David showed him how to use leverage and positioning to control a larger opponent. Christopher learned that weight distribution was critical. He learned that balance could be more important than strength. He learned techniques to escape holds and how to create holds that opponents could not escape from. Next, Christopher trained with a martial arts expert named Maya who taught judo and jiu-jitsu. Maya showed him how to redirect an opponent's force against them. She taught him that a smaller person could defeat a larger person if they understood the physics of movement. She showed him how to use his opponent's own momentum as a weapon. Christopher practiced these techniques for hours each day. His body became sore and bruised. His muscles ached, but he continued to push himself harder. Lisa Park finally came to see Christopher after 3 days of research. She looked exhausted. She had bags under her eyes from lack of sleep. But she was excited about what she had discovered. She told Christopher that she believed she had found a weakness in the Vorthon fighting style. The weakness was not about physics or strength. The weakness was about psychology. Vortans were extremely aggressive fighters. They attacked constantly and without thinking carefully. This meant they were vulnerable to patience and strategy. Lisa explained her theory to Christopher. She said that Vorthons always fought the same way because it had always worked for them. They had never needed to adapt or change their tactics. Every opponent they had ever faced had been either weaker or similar to them in strength. No opponent had ever used extreme patience and evasion against them. Lisa believed that if Christopher could make Krexthor tire himself out by charging repeatedly, he might gain an advantage. But there was a problem with this theory. Vortons had incredible endurance. They could fight for hours without getting tired. So Christopher would need to do more than just evade. He would need to set a trap. He would need to wait for the exact moment when Krexthor was most vulnerable. Lisa had studied the combat recordings and identified a pattern. Every Vorthon fighter had a moment of overcommitment. After throwing a massive strike, there was a brief second when their balance was compromised. If Christopher could catch Krexthor during one of these moments, he might be able to use a grappling technique to control him. Christopher understood the strategy. He told Lisa that her analysis was brilliant, but he also told her that the plan was extremely risky. He said that if he mistimed anything, if he was even 1 second too slow, Krexthor would kill him. Lisa nodded. She said that she knew the risk was high, but the alternative was to surrender to Vorthon domination without even trying. The two of them spent the next 4 days refining the strategy. They practiced different scenarios. They looked at recordings of Krexthor's previous fights to study his personal fighting style. They discovered that Krexthor had a habit of throwing a particularly powerful punch called the Warlord strike. When he threw this punch, his entire body was committed to the attack. His balance was completely compromised for about 2 seconds. This was the moment when he was most vulnerable. Christopher practiced his response to this strike thousands of times. He would dodge to the side. He would get behind Krexthor. He would wrap his arms around the Warlord's torso. He would squeeze with everything he had. Lisa timed his movements with a computer. At first, his response was too slow. He needed to be faster. He practiced more. After hundreds of attempts, Christopher was able to respond consistently. He could dodge and wrap within 1.5 seconds. It was fast enough. On the 4th day of preparation, Christopher received a message from Earth. His family was sending him their love and support. His mother told him that she was proud of him no matter what happened. His younger brother told him that he believed Christopher could do this. His sister sent him a photo of herself holding a sign that said, "Go Christopher." Millions of humans across Earth were rooting for him. This knowledge gave Christopher additional strength, but he also felt the pressure intensifying. He understood that he was not just fighting for himself. He was fighting for all of humanity. If he won, humanity would gain respect and recognition in the galactic community. If he lost, humanity would be dominated and controlled by the Vorthon Empire. The stakes could not be higher. Lisa Park worked with the ship's medical team to prepare for the aftermath of the duel. Even if Christopher won, he would be injured. Vorthon's strength was just too great for any human to face without some damage. The medical team prepared treatments and medicines. They trained for emergency procedures. They prepared for the possibility that Christopher might be seriously hurt. On the 6th day before the duel, Christopher visited the meditation chamber aboard the diplomatic ship. He sat quietly and thought about why he was doing this. He thought about human history. He thought about all the times that humans had faced impossible odds and found a way to survive. He thought about human creativity and adaptability. He thought about the fact that humans had conquered their planet and spread to the stars despite not being the strongest species on their home world. Humans had always succeeded by being clever. Humans had always succeeded by working together. Humans had always succeeded by refusing to give up. Christopher also thought about Krexthor. He tried to understand the Warlord as a person, and not just as an opponent. Krexthor had been taught from birth that strength was all that mattered. Krexthor had never needed to develop strategy because his strength had always been enough. Krexthor probably had never faced an opponent who thought differently. Krexthor would not be prepared for what Christopher was planning. This realization gave Christopher confidence. On the 7th day, Christopher Hayes was ready. He had trained his body to the maximum of his abilities. He had studied his opponent. He had developed a strategy. He had prepared mentally and spiritually. Lisa Park was also ready. She had done everything she could to prepare him. The diplomatic team had made all the necessary arrangements with the Galactic Council. The ceremonial arena was being prepared on the neutral station. The broadcast equipment was being tested. The galaxy was watching and waiting. Christopher stood on the deck of the diplomatic ship and looked out at the stars. He thought about the moment that was coming. He thought about facing Krexthor in the arena. He thought about the weight of human expectations resting on his shoulders. He took a deep breath and said a silent promise to himself. He promised that he would give everything he had. He promised that he would not give up. He promised that he would show the galaxy what humanity was capable of. The time had come to prove that intelligence and courage could defeat strength and aggression. The ceremonial arena was constructed in the center of the neutral station Horizon 7. It was a perfect circle made from reinforced materials that could withstand tremendous impact. The arena was built to last for 1,000 years. Many important duels had taken place here before. But this was the first time an entire species would be watching to determine their place in the galaxy. The crowd filled the stands around the arena. Representatives from 60 different species were present in person. Billions more were watching from their home worlds through the broadcast system. The excitement and tension in the air was almost visible. Everyone knew that this moment would change galactic history. The broadcasters explained the rules one final time to the viewers at home. This was a formal duel under ancient galactic law. Combat would continue until one fighter surrendered by tapping the ground. Combat would also end if one fighter was rendered unconscious or was physically unable to continue fighting. The victor would be the one who forced their opponent into one of these 3 conditions. There were no weapons allowed. No armor was permitted. This was pure combat between 2 beings. The winners would claim victory and the right to set the terms of peace or war. The rules were simple and final. Christopher Hayes entered the arena from the western gate. He wore simple athletic clothing that allowed full movement. He had removed all jewelry and all protective equipment. His body was exposed. His muscles were tense. He walked to the center of the arena and stood silently. The crowd from the human delegation cheered, but the sound was small compared to the crowd as a whole. Most of the other species were silent. They were waiting. They were curious. They did not believe a human could win this fight. Krexthor entered from the eastern gate. The Warlord wore nothing at all. His massive gray body was covered in scars. Each scar told a story of a fight he had won. Each scar was a badge of honor for the Vortan warrior. Krexthor roared as he walked forward. The sound was deafening. It vibrated through the entire arena. The Warlord flexed his muscles and showed his strength to the crowd. He looked at Christopher with complete confidence. He looked like someone who knew they had already won. The Vorthan delegation roared with approval. They believed their leader was invincible. The 2 fighters stood facing each other about 10 meters apart. Christopher could see the confidence in Krexthor's eyes. The Warlord believed this would be an easy victory. He probably expected Christopher to charge at him, or to try to trade blows. He expected to crush the human like he had crushed 1,000 other opponents. Christopher's face remained calm and peaceful. He showed no fear. He showed no doubt. Inside his mind, he was reviewing the strategy. He was remembering the training. He was preparing himself mentally for what was coming. The announcer raised his hand. The entire arena fell silent. Billions of viewers leaned forward in their seats. This was the moment that would change everything. The announcer dropped his hand and the duel began. Krexthor immediately charged forward with incredible speed. For a creature so massive, his movement was shocking. He moved like lightning. He roared as he ran toward Christopher. The Warlord's first punch was aimed directly at Christopher's head. It was the kind of punch that could kill a human instantly. Christopher had trained for this exact moment. He moved his body to the left. The punch passed by his head so close that he could feel the air displacement. Krexthor's hand passed just inches from Christopher's face. The force of the missed punch was so great that it created a small sound like thunder. Krexthor immediately spun around and attacked again. This time he threw a combination of punches, left, right, left again. Each punch was powerful enough to break bones. Each punch was aimed at vital areas of Christopher's body. But Christopher had also trained for this. He moved like water. He dodged to the left. He dodged to the right. He bent backward. He stepped away. Every punch missed. Krexthor grew more aggressive. He threw faster and harder. He tried overhead strikes. He tried kicks. He tried to grab Christopher, but the human was always just out of reach. The crowd began to react. The other species were surprised that Christopher had not been hit yet. Some wondered if the human had a special advantage that they did not know about. Others began to see what was happening. Christopher was not trying to win through strength. He was using intelligence and speed. He was making Krexthor tire himself out. Krexthor realized that his direct attacks were not working. The Warlord tried a different strategy. He began to move more slowly and carefully. He tried to corner Christopher against the edge of the arena. He wanted to trap the human and limit his movement. But Christopher anticipated this. He moved toward the center of the arena where he had unlimited space to move. Krexthor followed. The Warlord was becoming frustrated. He had never faced an opponent who would not stand and fight him directly. The duel continued for 15 minutes. Krexthor attacked relentlessly. Christopher defended perfectly. Not a single attack connected. The Warlord's breathing became heavier. His movements became less precise. His speed decreased slightly. Christopher could see the fatigue building. But he also knew that Vorthons had incredible endurance. He could not just wait for Krexthor to get too tired to move. He needed to execute his plan. Then Krexthor threw the Warlord's strike. It was the technique that Lisa Park had identified. The massive punch that required total commitment. Krexthor put every ounce of his strength into this attack. His entire body was involved. His balance was completely compromised. This was the moment that Christopher had practiced thousands of times. Christopher dodged to the left. He moved with perfect timing. As Krexthor's punch passed him, Christopher moved behind the Warlord. He grabbed Krexthor around the torso with both arms. He locked his hands together and squeezed with all the strength he could produce. It was a hold from judo. It was called the bear hug, but it required perfect positioning and incredible strength to work against an opponent so powerful. Krexthor immediately realized what was happening. He tried to break the hold by increasing his strength, but Christopher held firm. He had trained his entire body for this moment. He thought of every human who believed in him. He thought of every human watching from Earth and the colonies. He drew strength from their hope and their faith. He squeezed harder. Krexthor tried to throw Christopher over his back. He struggled and twisted, but Christopher adjusted his weight and maintained his position. The Warlord gasped for air. He could not breathe properly while being squeezed this way. His hands grabbed at Christopher's arms, trying to pry them loose. But the human held on. Christopher did not let go. Seconds felt like hours. Krexthor's strength was legendary, but even Vorthon's strength had limits when you could not breathe. The Warlord's vision started to darken. He could not maintain consciousness. His body went limp. Still, Christopher held on. He had been told not to release the hold until the announcer declared victory. He had been warned that if he released too early, Krexthor might recover and continue fighting. Finally, Krexthor's hand reached down and tapped the arena floor 3 times. It was the sign of surrender. The Warlord had given up. Christopher immediately released the hold and stepped back. Krexthor fell to the ground, gasping for air. He was alive but defeated. He was breathing but unconscious. The crowd erupted in shock and disbelief. A human had defeated a Vorthon warlord. The impossible had happened. The announcer raised Christopher's hand in victory. The human ambassador stood in the center of the arena, covered in sweat and breathing heavily. His body was bruised from the many times Krexthor had come close to hitting him, but he was alive. He was standing. He had won. The human delegation roared with joy. Millions of humans across the galaxy screamed with excitement. Humanity had proven itself worthy of respect. The duel was over and everything had changed. The medical team rushed into the ceremonial arena as soon as the duel ended. They moved Christopher Hayes to the medical facility aboard the diplomatic ship. His body was covered with bruises where Krexthor's attacks had come dangerously close to making contact. The doctor examined him carefully. There were no broken bones. There was no internal bleeding. There were no serious injuries. Christopher would recover fully within a few days. The medical team was amazed. They had expected much worse damage. Christopher told them that Lisa Park's strategy had worked perfectly. The key to survival had been not getting hit at all. Christopher rested in the medical bay while the news of his victory spread across the galaxy like lightning. Within hours, the story had reached billions of beings on thousands of worlds. The human who defeated a Vorthan warlord. The impossible had become reality. Different species reacted in different ways. Some were shocked. Some were impressed. Some were afraid. All of them understood that something fundamental had changed in galactic politics. On Earth, celebrations erupted in every major city. People gathered in public squares and cheered. They sang songs about Christopher Hayes. Children painted his face on their bodies as a sign of celebration. Universities held special events to discuss what the victory meant. Scientists analyzed how a human had defeated a physically superior opponent. The answer was intelligence. The answer was strategy. The answer was adaptability. These were things that humans excelled at. Humans had always succeeded not through strength but through cleverness. The Galactic Council reconvened 3 days after the duel. Krexthor had recovered from his defeat, but he was not the same. The Warlord had been humiliated in front of the entire galaxy. His authority was broken. His confidence was shattered. He demanded an immediate rematch with Christopher Hayes. He said that the victory was not legitimate. He said that there must have been some trick involved. He refused to accept his defeat. Christopher was brought before the council. He was wearing his formal diplomatic uniform again. His injuries had already healed significantly. He looked strong and confident. The council asked him if he would accept the Warlord's demand for another duel. Christopher considered the question carefully. He had trained his entire life for diplomacy and negotiation. He had prepared himself mentally to face Krexthor. He did not want to make this about fighting. He wanted this to be about peace. Christopher politely declined the rematch. He said that one victory was sufficient. He said that the rules of the formal duel had been met. He said that the outcome was final. Krexthor roared with rage. He said that Christopher was afraid. He said that the human was a coward. He said that only a coward would refuse a rematch. But the other council members did not agree with the Warlord. They understood that the duel had been fair. They understood that the rules had been followed. They understood that a human had proven that even Vorthon's strength could be defeated. Several council members began to speak. They said that this moment showed that intelligence could balance strength. They said that this moment showed that peaceful negotiations could work. They said that this moment changed everything. The Vorthon Empire faced a crisis. Many of their subject species began to question their loyalty to Krexthor. If the Warlord could be defeated, then maybe the Vorthon Empire was not as powerful as everyone believed. Some species that had been conquered and ruled by the Vorthons began to consider rebellion. Within days of the duel, 3 Vorthon colonies declared their independence. They said they no longer wanted to be part of an empire ruled by a defeated warlord. Inside the Vorthon military, challenges began to emerge. Warriors who had served under Krexthor demanded that he be replaced as warlord. Vorthon culture required that their leaders be the strongest fighters. If Krexthor had been defeated by a human, then he was no longer worthy of leadership. A new warlord had to be chosen. Krexthor tried to fight to keep his position, but he was challenged by other warriors. He was forced to accept combat duels with other Vorthon fighters. These fights were brutal and internal. Krexthor won most of them, but he was becoming weaker with each battle. His authority was crumbling. Christopher Hayes received messages from thousands of species. Some wanted to form trade alliances with humanity. Others wanted to establish cultural exchanges. Some species wanted to learn human fighting techniques. Others wanted to learn human philosophy. The victory had created an incredible opportunity for humanity. Species that had previously viewed humans as minor or unimportant now saw them as worthy of respect. The Galactic Council offered Christopher a position as a permanent member of the Council. They said he would have authority over diplomatic matters. They said he would have influence in galactic decisions. They said he would represent humanity at the highest levels of power. Christopher accepted the position, but he also made a request. He asked that other human representatives be added to the council. He said that humanity could contribute more than just one person's wisdom. He said that humanity had much to offer the galactic community. The council agreed to add 3 additional human representatives. Back on Earth, the government held a massive ceremony to honor Christopher Hayes. He was declared a national hero. Statues were erected in his honor in the major cities. Schools changed their curriculum to include lessons about the duel. Children studied Christopher's strategy and his courage. History books were rewritten to include the moment when humanity proved itself to the galaxy. Universities offered courses on Vorthan culture and the lessons of the duel. Lisa Park received a promotion to commander of the Diplomatic Corps. She was given the responsibility of training new human ambassadors. She created a program called the Hayes Protocol that taught diplomatic strategy to human diplomats. The program emphasized intelligence, patience, and understanding your opponent. It taught diplomats to look for the patterns and weaknesses in their opponent's behavior. It taught them to use strategy instead of force. The Hayes Protocol became famous throughout the human government. Scientists studied the duel and wrote papers about it. They analyzed how a smaller, weaker species could defeat a larger, stronger species. They concluded that the key factor was intelligence combined with physical training. They said that humans had evolved to be problem solvers. They said that humans excelled at reading behavior and predicting patterns. They said that these abilities could be just as valuable as physical strength in combat situations. The Vorthan warlord Krexthor eventually lost his position to a younger, stronger warrior. He stepped down from power and left the Vorthan Empire. Krexthor traveled across the galaxy and experienced different cultures. He began to understand that strength alone was not sufficient for creating a lasting civilization. He began to see the value in peace and cooperation. The proud warlord slowly transformed into something different. He became interested in philosophy and conflict resolution. He decided to dedicate his remaining years to understanding why his way had failed and why Christopher's way had succeeded. On the diplomatic ship, Christopher Hayes stood on the observation deck and looked out at the stars. He thought about the moment in the arena when he had held Krexthor in his grip. He thought about the weight of human expectations. He thought about how everything had changed in just one day. Humanity had moved from being a minor species to being recognized as worthy of respect. The galaxy had witnessed that intelligence and courage could defeat even the most powerful opponent. Christopher knew that the real work was just beginning. Humanity now had the opportunity to prove itself worthy of the respect they had earned. The future was uncertain, but it was full of possibility. 5 years had passed since the historic duel between Christopher Hayes and Krexthor. The galaxy had changed dramatically in that time. The age of military domination was fading. The age of intelligence and diplomacy was beginning. Trade routes that had been closed to humanity were now open. New technologies from alien civilizations flowed into human space. Human scientists worked alongside researchers from 100 different species. Universities welcomed students from worlds that humans had never even heard of 5 years earlier. Christopher Hayes had returned to Earth after his victory, but he was not content to rest on his achievements. He continued to work as humanity's chief diplomat. He traveled to different worlds and met with leaders of various species. He shared humanity's philosophy of finding peaceful solutions to conflict. He told the story of the duel thousands of times. Each time he told it, he emphasized that the victory was not about physical strength. It was about understanding your opponent. It was about patience. It was about using intelligence to overcome obstacles. His message resonated with many species. On Earth, life had transformed in remarkable ways. The space programs received increased funding. Young humans dreamed of becoming explorers and diplomats. The military academy restructured its training to emphasize strategy over brute force. Children studied the duel in history classes. Teachers used Christopher's victory as a lesson about the power of intelligence and preparation. The entire human culture began to shift. Humans became known throughout the galaxy not as warriors, but as thinkers and problem solvers. Lisa Park had created the Hayes Protocol, and it had become the foundation for diplomatic training throughout human space. The program was so successful that other species began to request permission to teach it to their own diplomats. Lisa trained instructors from Felinar, from Zorvath, from Klaxon, and from dozens of other species. Each of these species learned from humanity's unique approach to understanding opponents and finding peaceful solutions. Lisa Park became one of the most respected diplomatic strategists in the galaxy. She wrote several books about her approach to conflict resolution. The human delegation at the Galactic Council expanded from 3 members to more than 20. These human diplomats held important positions in every major council committee. Some oversaw trade negotiations, others managed cultural exchanges, some worked on environmental issues, others focused on scientific cooperation. Humanity's voice had become important in galactic affairs. When humans spoke at the council, other species listened carefully. Trade with other species brought enormous wealth to humanity. Earth received new materials and new technologies. Human companies began trading goods throughout the galaxy. Human food products became popular on several alien worlds. Human music and art gained appreciation from species with completely different sensory systems. Human literature was translated into 100 languages. Humans discovered that they had much to contribute to galactic culture beyond military power. They had creativity. They had imagination. They had a unique perspective on the universe. The Vorthon Empire had fragmented significantly since Krexthor's defeat. Several territories had declared independence. Others had joined the Galactic Council. The Vorthon military had transformed from a force of pure aggression into a more balanced fighting force. They began to study strategy and tactics instead of relying only on strength. Some Vorthon officers even requested training from human military specialists. The Vorthons wanted to understand how a smaller species could defeat them. Krexthor's transformation had been remarkable. The former Warlord had traveled across the galaxy for 3 years learning about different cultures and different ways of thinking. He had written a book titled Strength Through Wisdom. In the book, he described his own journey from a warrior who valued only strength to someone who understood that intelligence and compassion could be just as powerful. The book became a surprising bestseller. It was read by millions of beings across the galaxy. Krexthor received an invitation to speak at universities. He accepted and began a speaking tour that would last for years. On one of his visits to Earth, Krexthor met with Christopher Hayes. The 2 former opponents sat together and talked about their lives. Krexthor told Christopher that he had spent most of his life believing that strength was all that mattered. He said that the defeat in the arena had changed his perspective. He said that he had learned more in the years since the duel than he had learned in all his previous years as a warlord. Krexthor apologized for his past behavior. He said that he was sorry for threatening humanity and for his arrogance. Christopher accepted the apology and they became unlikely friends. They began to work together on projects aimed at promoting peace throughout the galaxy. 5 years after the duel, the Galactic Council held a special commemorative event. Representatives from all major species gathered on Horizon 7. The event was held at the same ceremonial arena where the duel had taken place. Thousands of beings attended in person. Billions watched through broadcast systems. The event was called the Duel of Representatives. It was meant to celebrate not just the victory, but what the victory had meant for galactic relations. Christopher Hayes stood in the center of the arena and addressed the crowd. He spoke about human philosophy. He said that humans believed that every problem could be solved through intelligence and cooperation. He said that humans valued peace but would fight to protect what they believed in. He said that humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy, but they were creative and adaptable. He said that humanity's greatest strength was the ability to learn from others and to find new solutions to old problems. His words were translated into 100 languages and broadcast throughout the galaxy. Krexthor also spoke at the event. He talked about his transformation and his new understanding of power. He said that true strength came from wisdom and compassion. He said that the most powerful leaders were those who could think strategically instead of just fighting harder. He said that he was proud of how the galaxy had changed in 5 years. He said that the duel had been the turning point where the galaxy moved from an age of domination to an age of cooperation. The Galactic Council made an official announcement at the event. They declared that the anniversary of the duel would be celebrated annually across the galaxy. The day would be called Humanity Day or the Day of Intelligence. It would be a reminder that intelligence could overcome strength. It would be a reminder that small species could have big impacts on galactic history. It would be a reminder that one person with courage and a good strategy could change the future. On Earth, Christopher Hayes walked through a park in the city where he had grown up. Children recognized him and asked him questions about the duel. He answered their questions and told them about his training and his strategy. He told them that anyone could accomplish great things if they prepared carefully and believed in themselves. An elderly woman approached him and thanked him. She said that Christopher's victory had given her hope. She said that she had been living during a time when it seemed like humanity had no future in the galaxy. She said that Christopher had changed that. She said that humanity now had hope. Christopher thought about how much had changed in 5 years. Humanity had moved from being a minor species to being respected throughout the galaxy. The victory in the duel had opened doors that had been closed. It had created opportunities that had not existed before. It had shown that intelligence and creativity were valuable. It had shown that peaceful solutions to conflict were possible. The duel had been about more than just one person or one species. It had been about changing the fundamental way the galaxy thought about power and strength. The future was bright for humanity. Trade relationships continued to expand. Scientific cooperation between humans and other species produced incredible advances. Human and alien teams worked together on projects that would have seemed impossible 5 years earlier. The galaxy was becoming a better place. Species were learning to work together. Conflicts were being resolved through negotiation instead of violence. The duel between Christopher Hayes and Krexthor had been the spark that ignited this transformation. One person with courage had changed the future for an entire species and for the entire galaxy. 10 years had passed since the duel between Christopher Hayes and Krexthor. The galaxy had continued to change in ways that no one could have predicted a decade earlier. Humanity had become one of the most influential species in the galactic community. Human diplomats sat on every major council. Human scientists worked on research projects across 1,000 different worlds. Human culture had spread throughout the galaxy. But with this success came new challenges that Christopher Hayes had never anticipated. Christopher was now 50 years old and showing signs of fatigue. He had spent the last 10 years traveling constantly between different worlds. He had negotiated trade agreements with 100 different species. He had helped mediate conflicts between species that had been at war for centuries. He had built relationships with leaders across the galaxy. But the constant work had taken a toll on his body and his mind. He was tired in a way that rest could not fix. On a quiet evening, Christopher sat in his office on the diplomatic station and reflected on everything that had happened. A young human diplomat named Kevin entered the office and asked if Christopher was feeling all right. Christopher said that he was simply tired. He said that he had been doing this work for so long that he had almost forgotten what rest felt like. Kevin told Christopher that the entire galactic community was indebted to him. He said that Christopher had transformed the future for humanity and for dozens of other species. Kevin said that it was time for Christopher to step back and let others carry the responsibility. Christopher thought about Kevin's words. He realized that he had been holding on to his position for too long. The younger generation of human diplomats was ready to lead. They had learned everything that Christopher could teach them. They understood the philosophy of patience and strategy. They understood how to negotiate with different species. They understood how to find peaceful solutions to conflict. Perhaps it was time to let them take over. Christopher announced his retirement from active diplomatic service. He would remain as an advisor and consultant, but he would no longer travel constantly between worlds. He would return to Earth and take time to rest and reflect. The news of his retirement spread throughout the galaxy. Leaders from hundreds of species sent messages thanking him for his service. Some offered him awards and honors. Some invited him to visit their homeworlds as a guest of honor. Christopher received invitations from more places than he could possibly visit in several lifetimes. With Christopher stepping back, other human diplomats stepped forward to fill the leadership positions. Kevin became the chief human representative to the Galactic Council. He was young, but he was talented. He understood the complexities of galactic politics. He had studied under Christopher for years. Kevin brought new energy and new ideas to the diplomatic corps. He proposed initiatives that would further strengthen relationships between humanity and other species. One of Kevin's first major projects was to establish a galactic university. The university would be located on a neutral station and would accept students from all species. Human professors would teach alongside professors from 100 other civilizations. Students would learn not just from their own species, but from being exposed to completely different ways of thinking. Christopher supported this idea enthusiastically. He believed that education and cultural exchange were the keys to lasting peace. Back on Earth, Christopher Hayes settled into a life of reflection and teaching. He wrote a book about his experiences in the galactic community. The book was titled The Path of Intelligence, and it became one of the most widely read books in human history. In the book, Christopher described the philosophy that had guided him throughout his career. He wrote about the importance of understanding your opponents. He wrote about the power of patience and strategy. He wrote about how intelligence and compassion could overcome even the most difficult obstacles. Universities across Earth invited Christopher to teach classes. He accepted positions at several major universities. He taught courses on diplomatic strategy and galactic relations. His classes were always full. Students from every field came to listen to his lectures. He spoke about the duel, but he also spoke about the larger lessons it contained. He emphasized that the victory had never been his alone. He said that Lisa Park's research had been critical. He said that the support of millions of humans had given him strength. He said that without the training and the preparation, he would have lost. Lisa Park had also begun to transition into retirement. She had spent 10 years training diplomatic strategists. Her Hayes Protocol had been adopted by governments across the galaxy. Species that had traditionally relied on military force were now emphasizing intelligence and strategy. Lisa had received numerous awards for her work, but like Christopher, she had decided it was time to step back. Lisa and Christopher began collaborating on a new project. They decided to write a detailed manual about the strategy that had defeated Krexthor. The manual would explain not just what had happened, but why it had worked. It would teach readers how to analyze their opponents and identify their weaknesses. It would explain how to use patience and strategy instead of force. The book was called Strategic Victory, and it became required reading in military academies across the galaxy. In the Vorthon Empire, Krexthor had become a respected teacher and philosopher. He established a school dedicated to teaching other Vorthons about conflict resolution and peaceful negotiation. Many young Vorthons studied under him. The former warlord had transformed completely. He had written several more books after Strength Through Wisdom. Each book explored different aspects of wisdom and leadership. Krexthor had become an unlikely ambassador for peace in a species that had been known for centuries only for war and aggression. The Galactic Council held another major event to commemorate the 15th anniversary of the duel. This time the event was held on Earth. Hundreds of alien dignitaries visited humanity's homeworld. They saw where Christopher Hayes had grown up. They visited the statue that had been erected in his honor. They experienced human culture and human hospitality. The visit had a profound impact on the alien leaders. Many of them had never been to Earth before. Many of them had never met humans in person before coming to the Council. During the event, the Galactic Council made an important announcement. They declared that they would establish a new institute dedicated to peaceful conflict resolution. The institute would be called the Hayes Institute, and it would be named after Christopher Hayes. The institute would train diplomats from all species in the techniques of peaceful negotiation. Christopher would serve as the director emeritus. The institute would be located on a neutral station, but it would maintain close connections with Earth. Christopher accepted the honor, but he insisted that the institute also recognize Lisa Park's contributions. He said that Lisa's strategic analysis had been just as important as his own courage. He said that without her research and preparation, he would not have won the duel. The Galactic Council agreed and renamed the institution the Hayes and Park Institute for Peaceful Conflict Resolution. Both Christopher and Lisa were recognized as founders of the new organization. The institute opened with students from 40 different species. They came to learn the philosophy and the techniques of peaceful resolution. They studied the duel as a case study in strategy and intelligence. They learned how to analyze opponents and identify weaknesses. They learned how to use patience and timing to achieve objectives. They learned that violence should always be a last resort. They learned that intelligence and preparation could overcome almost any obstacle. Christopher spent his time as director emeritus writing and teaching. He mentored young diplomats from different species. He helped them understand how to navigate the complexities of galactic politics. He told them stories about his experiences. He shared the lessons he had learned over his career. Many young diplomats credited Christopher with changing the direction of their lives and their careers. On quiet evenings, Christopher would walk through the parks near the Institute. He would think about the journey that had brought him to this point. He thought about the moment when he had accepted Krexthor's challenge. He thought about the training and the preparation. He thought about the duel itself. He thought about how that one moment had changed everything. Not just for him personally, but for humanity and for the entire galaxy. The legacy of the duel continued to grow with each passing year. New generations of species learned about it. They learned the lessons. They understood that intelligence and strategy could overcome physical strength. They understood that peaceful solutions were possible. They understood that one person with courage and determination could change the future. The duel between Christopher Hayes and Krexthor had become more than just history. It had become a symbol of hope for the entire galactic community. It had become a reminder that change was possible, and that a better future could be built through intelligence, patience, and determination.